no public hearings, so discussion of the citizen survey questionnaire. We have William St. Amour here from Cobalt, and he's joining us tonight to discuss the citizen survey, where we're at with it, what he needs from us, and potential next steps here. So go ahead, Mr. Amour. St. Amour.
Thank you very much.
You got to get really close.
Close enough. Move some things out of the way so I can do that. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you tonight. I appreciate you taking the time to do so. What I wanted to do is just take a couple of minutes to give you some context in terms of the right. All right.
Right at your mouth, like that.
All right. So what I would like to do is give you some context of the draft that you received. So as you make the consideration of whether or not to continue work with Cobalt, and also to provide you some...
Sorry, William. They still can't hear you in the back. Just
Okay.
put that up to the mouth.
Okay, so you can hear me now. So I'd like to give you some context of the draft that was received by the board to help you understand where we were coming from and in terms of the direction that we were going as you make the decision on whether or not to continue with Cobalt, and also as you make the decisions of what to do with the survey and how to gather the feedback going forward. So first of all, I'd like to share that early on in the project, in the conversation that I had with Howard, he was very honest and said that he did not want himself to bias the project one way or the other, and that he wanted us to just really listen to some of the things shared by the Planning Commission, by the Township, and the various comments that were made, and initially to put together our thoughts on what we thought would be best in terms of helping the Township move forward. So Howard really did diligently stay clear of the process and gave us the opportunity to ask those questions and to meet with the commission and to come up with what we thought were the objectives that would help design the survey, help guide it. And then to illustrate those, we also had been working on the survey in the background of what those questions could look like based on those draft objectives. So the draft objectives did go to the Township. One of the things that we're hoping is that the trustees would spend a bit more time looking at those and potentially narrowing them down, spending a little bit more time making sure that those objectives were focused on the things that you actually needed in terms of the information to support the decisions you needed to make. Certainly there's a lot more work that needs to be done even at the objective stage, that we have clarity in terms of forming the questionnaire. So based on what we had put together, we obviously missed the target. The thing that we would need from the Township, if you decide to keep working from us, is much greater clarity in terms of what the target is, in terms of what are the decisions that you'd like to make, and what is the specific information that you need in order to make those decisions. So those are some key pieces for us. As we put together the survey and we listen to the different things that were going on in the town, what would guide a decision on scales and those kind of things, and understand the larger context of why people were coming down one way or the other based on Biltmore and similar sort of developments to assist the Township moving forward. That's what we heard just from the observations. Now, we did hear some things about supporting the master plan going forward, so that is one of the places that we took some ideas from, both the 2010 survey and the 1996 survey. Both of them are good surveys and had a lot of thoughtful questions put into them. But we kind of pulled those different pieces together to try to take a first stab at the information that we felt would help you move forward on some of those really key decisions. So it was a draft. It was our initial stab based on just our observations. Obviously, it was not on target. So from our perspective, really the question is, what are the decisions you'd like to make with the data? Is this just a master plan kind of survey to help move forward on the next one that comes up in a couple of years? The 2010 survey was about 2 years before the 2012 master plan, so the timing is about right. Or is it something that is more specifically directed on helping you to get to the other side of the Biltmore question one way or the other and understand the context of why people are coming down one way or the other? So those are kind of the two paths that we see. There are undoubtedly some other paths as well. And ultimately the decision of whether or not you continue to work with us or not is something else for the Commission to consider.
You didn't get any further information from the Board of Trustees about the objectives from their discussion. I asked Mr. St. Amour and Ms. Douglas to watch the Board of Trustees meeting so they could get a feel for what was going on there. And really, there wasn't a lot of discussion of the actual objectives, and there wasn't really, I don't know, there was a lot of pushback about the questions. So the focus wasn't on quite what you had intended at the Board of Trustees meeting. So here we are with Mr. St. Amour back again, and wondering if these objectives fit our needs. Ms. Chick.
I don't think that the board actually had a problem with the objectives. It had more to do with the structure of the questions and some of the questions that they were asking. And maybe I'm not understanding exactly what everybody's thought on the Planning Commission or the Board of Trustees is on the purpose of the survey. My hope was that this wasn't about Biltmore is out there. There's no denying that. It is a question. Actually, my perception is that Biltmore is just the name we're giving to, do we want growth in the township or do we not want growth? I mean, it's because Biltmore asked for an amendment that we're talking about it, but it's been a discussion in this township for 20-some years, and there's no resolution. So my hope for this survey was that this wasn't necessarily about the master plan or about Biltmore as much as knowing, the residents giving us an idea of exactly what they want as a community. What direction do you want us to go in so we can make good decisions based on what they've given us as what they're asking for. So it was one of the things that did come up, Mr. St. Amour, was that question number 1. You're asking to identify 7 features, and so anybody could pick 7 features that they really like, but how do you determine which one is most important to those people that answered the questions, the survey, sorry?
So there are multiple ways of getting at different kind of information. The 2 options really for the first piece and looking at the importance and the prioritization, multiple choice, which is the option that we went with, and Likert scale was another one that was brought up. That's also a very valid way of gathering that information. And there are trade-offs. So with the multiple choice, it has the advantages of being, first of all, very familiar to folks. People understand how to take that kind of survey. It's simple, it's fast. It does conserve space in the survey, so the survey is not as long. There is an aspect of forced choice. So when you have a long list and they can only pick 7, there's some inherent prioritization in terms of what people select and what they don't select. And it does provide aggregated prioritization based on the prevalence of opinion. So it's not the strength of opinion, but in terms of the intensity of the feeling, but it is based on the prevalence. How often do people select one of these items as being in their top 7? So from a prioritization standpoint, in the aggregate, you end up with a bar chart that shows you what are the things that are selected the most often and what are the things that are not selected very often. So you get a very clear kind of bar chart that shows you what are the things that are selected most often. What it does not give you is at the individual level, for that one person filling out the survey, of those 7 items, what is the one thing that's most important to them? This methodology does not support the analysis at the individual level. So where you do want that is in a marketing and sales situation, for example. If you wanted to follow up with a particular person and say, okay, I'm selling widgets, what are the features that are most important to you? From a sales perspective, then taking that lead, calling the person back and saying, hey, I want to tell you about this item, and these are the widgets these are the features that are most important to you. So that's one application of a Likert scale. Likert scales are also useful in understanding kind of that intensity piece. So of the things that are on the list that they could choose from, Likert helps you kind of rank them based on the intensity of how much they want it. So do they want it not at all? Do they want it just a little bit? Is it something that they kind of would like, or is it something that they very strongly would like? So it does provide you a lot more nuance in terms of that intensity. But there are disadvantages with Likert. One is it takes a lot more space because you're basically putting a scale on each of those questions. It does allow a lower response rate, typically, because it is a slower instrument. It takes more time. It looks a bit more intimidating to take. There are some methodological issues with it in terms of straight lining. So if you have from strongly disagree to strongly agree or not important to very important, there's a percentage of folks who really don't differentiate. They just go straight down the column and vote the same way for everything, in which case you really don't end up with any sort of prioritization at all because, again, they kind of said everything is important to me. And then there are some other kinds of biases that can fall into it as far as, I mean, there's acquiescence bias where people generally want to be agreeable, so they tend to skew their results a little more toward the favorable side. There's also a halo effect that sometimes happens, so if there's one item that is very important to them, when they come to the item underneath it, sometimes for some people that influences how they respond. It might move that point a little bit. And there's also debate on whether or not you have a middle point in that range or not. Is it an odd or even scale where people can kind of sit in the middle, or do you want them to fall on one side or the other? So there are good things and bad things about the Likert and the multiple choice, and having the discussion about those relative strengths, I think, is healthy.
Madam Chair. Question, to offset some of those things, such as survey fatigue, how many versions of this will go out? Meaning, is encourage more commercial development always going to be the top left column first answer to the question number 1 on every single survey that goes out? Because that's going to skew things, because you do have surveyor fatigue where they're taking the survey and or there are some people that are just like, oh yeah, that, without reading further on. So I know sometimes that's offset by having 3 versions of it that go out that all have all the same content, but in different, to adjust for that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And really, regardless of whether or not it's multiple choice or Likert, you still run into that same sort of issue as far as the sequencing of the questions. And that's something that we'd work through as the survey is finalized to figure out exactly what that is. Until the questions themselves are finalized, I mean, that's more of a layout kind of thing that gets adjusted because you don't want to actually change the question so much, but the sequencing, like you said, is something that is a valid concern.
Maybe it'd be better if there weren't so many things to choose from, or if we broke them up into, you know, what features, characteristics, and services would you like to see prioritized as relates to, you know, say commercial development or residential development or open space preservation or land preservation or whatever. Maybe we could kind of group them into like concepts or something, so there wouldn't, but then you wouldn't know if because it's not an either or thing, I don't think. There's good development and there's good preservation, and it's not necessarily an either or. And here it sort of makes it an either or. When I look at question 1, and there's so many things I think about, well, you know, when you go to the polling place on election day and you get to vote for 3 trustees or 4 trustees, and there's 10 people running, and that's how you end up, you know, so then everybody's vote for 4 or 1, you know, because people can plunk too, or, you know, bullet vote or whatever. If nothing else is very important to them, or if they really want to make sure their item is there, they vote for 1, you know, or 2. So, I mean, so it seems like that would influence what you got in number 1 also, if you have so many to choose from. So I don't know how to answer those questions, but I just kind of see it as a complicated thing to, you know, to kind of get right in the question.
Those are all excellent points. And I do like the idea of breaking it into smaller groups, more thematic. I think that would make it simpler.
Thematic, yeah.
If we wanted to go with a multiple choice kind of option, if that's what's going to meet your needs. If it's Likert, then it would be kind of a different approach, still probably breaking it into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, if it's a multiple choice, then it would be a little bit more flexible. But I do like the idea of breaking it into smaller groups, more thematic. I think that would make it simpler. If we wanted to go with a multiple choice kind of option, if that's what's going to meet your needs. If it's Likert, then it would be kind of a different approach, still probably breaking it into pieces. So it comes back to the question, though, of what are the specific decisions that the township would like to make with the data, and that would help us really craft the instrument to be more focused on what that target is that you'd like to achieve. Because right now it is a bit unfocused, and, well, it's more than a bit, it is unfocused. And so it's a draft, and the hope is that we would be able to, through these kind of conversations, make it much more focused and get you the information that you need.
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Dignan.
I mean, there are a few other things that I came across here that kind of, you know, I think to the general public, you ask somebody that lives in an apartment, how big's a quarter acre, third acre, half acre, 2 acres, 1 acre, 5 acres? They have no idea. They have no idea how big a 5 acre parcel is. You know, you take them down here and stand them on the corner and say this township facility, including parking lots, is 5 acres. That's the first concept of what 5 acres is to them that they've probably ever seen. So I think that's a very difficult thing. While those of us involved in planning say, why wouldn't anybody know that? Well, I just think the general public may have a difficult time with that. On the same note, what's that? Let me get back to that. Question number 11 is just way out there. This planning commission has taken a vote. There was a motion of support in this planning commission and a vote to open up the entire master plan to review it. And while we made some steps that we wouldn't make today probably, the fact that Biltmore's requesting something, while that's out there, this planning commission asked for things and has never, as a commission, has never heard back.
Right.
So the point to raise that development, that capacity, that density is just inflammatory language, in my opinion, in a survey, and has no place in it. The other thing you come into is, I know an awful lot of people that live in this community. They have no idea where Spencer Road is. When you get down to 22, and people are, and I understand you're trying to quadrant this off, you're going to need to have a visual. You're going to need to have a visual for folks, and whether that's a square that's the township, showing prominent US 23 and North Territorial with a grid 1, 2, 3, and 4. You know, the reality is we're scaling this to the entire township. So we have to understand that you know, there's, I mean, there's folks that may have passed Spencer Road, but may have never known so. I've been here.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when we originally talked about, Charlene, I think she was here, that we had mentioned that or maybe it was earlier discussion about using the map that we use for master planning to divide the township into subsections, to use that for people to identify where they're at.
But you know what? If we're mailing them to registered voters, we ought to know, and they're coded, we shouldn't have to ask them where they live, because when these things come back, you're going to know where they live. So we shouldn't even need that at all. I mean, you probably can pinpoint to the road and the house.
Well,
When they come back.
as far, I'm not, you mean to use this kind of a map for that?
You wouldn't even need to ask them where they live.
No, this isn't about where they live. This is where would you, if you wanted to ask a question, where would you like to see development in the township?
Oh,
Okay, what areas of the township do you want to see land preservation, permanent land preservations to happen, that kind of a thing?
Yep. Yeah, I sent a note suggesting that we include some maps that show the sewer service boundaries, our transportation network, the location of current parks, the location of land preserved through private easements, and we're going to see that in 2 weeks. You know, groundwater recharge areas and a map maybe of the future land use, but it was too complicated. So maybe some of that, or the important parts of that, would be good. So I don't know. I threw that out there. I'm always throwing stuff out there, so we'll see what comes back. But I don't know. You have a comment, Mr. Wallman?
No, everything that's been mentioned so far, so I mean, I couldn't come up with anything else.
Yeah. One thing I would wonder if, so here we have in number 1, we've got encourage more local events such as festivals, music, sports, and art. Well, I was thinking, we've got a lot of stuff going on in the township, but does the township government do it, or is it the people that do it? And so I'm just wondering, is some of this out of the range of what government should be doing, and then why are we asking questions about it? So, I mean, we always accept anybody's application to do anything, right? But we don't put on deals ourselves, do we?
I mean, I think there's a lot of entities in this township doing things. I mean, whether it's,
Right.
you know, the
Senior center.
senior center, folks
Community center.
downtown, pond hockey, I mean, 4th of July, the school district, I mean,
Kiwanis.
Kiwanis,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things going on. What I see here is we're becoming a little educated on what we want, and I don't know that I want the folks at Cobalt to be successful,
Yeah.
because if they're successful, we're successful at this. And I don't know that we have necessarily gone through what we needed to go through to give them the information for them to be successful at this point. I really don't feel we have. From watching the township board meeting and reviewing this and the feelings that I have, I feel like I haven't been able to come to Cobalt and say, here, this is what we as a planning commission, not me as an individual or you as an individual, and a township board need to find out. I just don't feel like we've done that.
Okay.
I don't feel like we've been equipped to understand how to do that yet. We're getting there.
Yeah.
We're getting there through this process, but this is not what I think we were looking for.
Then we need to give more direction. Do you have some more comment?
I should have made some copies of this, but I didn't, but
Yeah.
it's something that I have that I probably give to Mr. St. Amour to take a look at and work with. It's not complete, though. I really feel that there has to be a balance in a lot of the questions. I know there was some comment, particularly from the public, regarding page, I think it was, there were several questions about residential development and development, but there was nothing about land preservation, and I know we told that. I also spoke to Charlene about that as well, that we needed to have that in there as well, so we know what people want. So I will give you this, but it's not complete, so.
Okay, sure.
Because it's halfway through it, right? Okay.
The one thing that I want to encourage you to think about, because the temptation is to go directly into the draft, and that was a straw model to kind of get things going. But as Ken mentioned, really thinking about what is the information you need, what are the decisions that you need to make, and then making sure that kind of the questions are plugging into those sort of decisions and the information needs that you've got. There's a lot of things that we could ask that are interesting, a lot of things that are more of a quality of life kind of thing that maybe the township directly does not control, but you're still interested in kind of encouraging it, fostering it to happen. I don't know if that's something that you want to get into or not. There's community satisfaction issues and a lot of things that you could go into along those lines. But it's really thinking about what are the specific decisions, what's the specific information, before you start getting deeply into the question wording, because you may decide that entire questions come out because they just aren't helpful, and other whole question sets might go in because that's really the kind of information that you need to make your
Well,
decisions.
I think we really have to ask some hard questions. You know, like I said, this has been, I've been here for 15 years, and this conversation's been going on for 20 years. You got people at this end of the spectrum giving their opinion. You got people at the other end of the spectrum giving their opinion, but you rarely hear from the people in the middle. They have an opinion too. They just don't get to come here, and we don't hear from them, and we need to hear from them. But we have to ask the hard questions that people have been tap dancing around and afraid to ask because people start yelling at them. But if we're not asking those questions, we're never going to know, and we can't make good decisions.
More comments? Well, I had a list that I sent, you know, topics, or I wondered what the public thought about expanding the sewer service area, you know, because that has huge implications in the density of homes that we can allow, the number of homes that we can allow, and then if you're providing more homes, where's the best location for them? You know, so my question concerned the sewer service area, and we have some challenges right now with the sewer capacity, but I have faith that the Board of Trustees will correct that, you know, for at least current users, and if there's the desire to expand the sewer service district, then I'm sure the trustees will take care of that also. But I also wonder what the public thinks about that, because we do have a lot of people that are concerned about saving farmland, and or not necessarily saving farmland, but keeping the density of housing down. So those are kind of questions, or I'd like to know what people think about that. Right now we have a philosophy of keeping the density along the US 23, US 23 corridor, because it's close to transportation, and that's where our current sewer service area is. But I would like to know what the public thinks about if they would like that expanded, and so there was that, and then there's always, yes, there's the capacity issue, but and then we went through a whole list of what basic services we'd like to have in the township, you know. So there was those questions about public transit and municipal water and the garbage pickup that we had discussed. Road repair seems to be a big topic, no matter what. And then recently there's the amenities that we talked about a waterfront park, a beach, that we've been discussing. This Van Curler property. What kind of support is there out there for the township attempting to provide a public beach on Whitmore Lake? So, or a waterfront park without a beach even. So, you know, what kind of amenities does the public want? You know, a downtown gathering space. I mean, where do they want the commercial? You know, what do we have enough industrial? Do we, you know, research, technology, manufacturing? Do we have enough land set aside for that? You know, but a lot of them wouldn't even know where it is, probably. So they're all challenges that we need to face as we ask these questions. And then of course there's the farmland and open space preservation, and what is the public willing to do to preserve land, if there's any interest in doing that, and what kind of things they think about when they think about the wetlands and the green spaces that we have, you know. So I don't know. It's huge. It's a complicated process. It's going to take time to kind of get the questions prepared. Ms. Chick, you were on the Blue Skies Committee when they put together the 2010 survey.
Yes.
How long did that take to get that survey just so?
Well, to the point where we were ready to take, it was probably about 6 months.
6
Yeah.
months?
Mhm.
Right. So that you had everything you wanted to ask.
Well, we talked to a lot of people first in the community, business owners, and that, you know, different representatives of different areas of the township. And like the Ken Seiler from the Washtenaw County Farm Bureau, and Mr. Iaquinto, he's a business owner in downtown area. Someone from the school board we talked to, so we talked to a lot of people. First, just to get some information, and so, yeah, we came up with this. We had 5 people working on it, and actually one of them had carried a couple of PhDs, so she was familiar with doing this, and this is what we came up with, and we were very happy with it.
Yeah, it was pretty comprehensive. Mr. Dignan?
One of the key elements to some of the questions that you were talking about there is our questions have to be such that the individuals who are answering them have the knowledge to be able to answer
Correct.
them. When you say, should we have, should we have more research office space? Do they know we have the RTM district out there that is mostly vacant land? No.
Right.
I mean, questions in the survey need to be questions that people have the knowledge to be able to answer them with a level of confidence. If you're going through a survey and it's questions you're like, I have no idea, I just worry that you get to 3, 4, 5 and you go, you know what, forget this.
Yeah.
I don't know any of this stuff, and
Yeah.
we don't want that. I mean, these are questions that are at the core of what someone wants, where they live, where they want to raise their families, where they want to retire to, where they want to walk down the street and enjoy, or go out on their farm and ride horses. That's the stuff that's important. So I don't know how you do that, especially when you're dealing with complex issues like sewer capacity and sewer survey districts, and it's got to be broken down. It's like when you're talking to someone from the university and you got to say, okay, there's a difference between speaking to your PhD peer and then everybody else, and so you have to use the knowledge that folks have. You want to really play off of their the things they see and deal with daily.
Right.
So
Are there jobs in the township? Do people want a job in the
Well-
town? Boil it down to the simple kind of everyday, how it impacts them, So,
I just wanted to clarify something. The Blue Sky Survey, even though it took that long, it was because we only met like once every other week, so,
well,
yeah.
we're not going to be meeting real often anyway either. I mean, this has been sort of fast-tracked, sort of, it seems that way, and I think we're feeling the challenges of that at this point, not having enough time to really, prepare it, and having it kind of rushed, and then not feeling confident that we're getting what we're getting, that we're getting to the answers that we wanted. And this is a good meeting. Are you getting anything from? I mean, I'm sure you're getting something from this meeting.
I am, now you can hear me. A lot of important considerations that I'm hearing from you. To your point, Ken, I think really focusing on the outcomes that people want to get to in the township. What are those kind of quality of life elements? What do they want to do with the land? I think that is very important. Where I start to get a little bit of heartburn is when we start getting into the more complex issues. So sewer districts and showing them maps and bundles of paper that get pretty technical. I think it's pretty clear that from a public education standpoint, sending them a big chunk of paper is probably not very effective communication. So educating them through the survey is probably not the best strategy. Instead, relying on the education they have or focusing on the outcomes. And then really that's why they have the Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission to then think about, okay, based on these outcomes and based on our own expertise, these are the ways that we'll get to those outcomes that they want us to get to. And to your point as far as the time, I think it is something that it's wise to take more time to develop it. It's unusual that the first time the survey comes out that it's a home run. I would say that almost never happens. So I think it's healthy to have people looking at it, people pounding on it, because from a foraging standpoint, the foraging makes it stronger. So taking the time to make sure it is something that meets your needs is a very valuable thing to do.
So I'm sure there's going to be some back and forth here with this. And Janet put some questions together. I'm encouraging us all to kind of to think about putting together some questions and then having Cobalt take a look and mesh them together and come up with.
Madam Chair, can I ask Ms. Chick, was there a temperature from the board as to how they felt or where they wanted to go from here?
They wanted actually for us to have this discussion tonight with
Okay.
Cobalt and share the board's thoughts, and then for us to discuss with them what we want from them too. This is basically our survey. You know, the board just has to approve it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel, and my other commissioners can state that our next step is probably to continue this discussion pending availability on our agenda next, you know, I mean, but, you know, you've gotten a lot of information from us today. I think we as a group have come to some conclusions that we may not have had when we sat down. Certainly, I think there's a lot of stuff I want to put down in writing and provide. And I don't know, that I'm proposing that may be how we choose to proceed. What do the rest of you feel?
Mr. Kuzno.
I just picked up on what Janet just said. This is a survey commissioned by the Planning Commission, correct?
Yes.
How
But-
did it get to this point, going to the trustees before we got to see it officially? Because I asked Larry, I said, is this the first time we're seeing
Yeah.
this thing? Because I'm kind of like, what's going on here? I did not know that.
The
And
first
so here
draft
we got
yeah.
disgruntled trustees because they're getting stuff that's supposed to be coming from us to them, and now we're going, well, we didn't really give that to you because we haven't seen it yet.
Right. My understanding is the draft that came to us first because we had the first meeting. That's the only reason it showed up on the agenda. Yeah.
We could have saved ourselves some embarrassment, I think, if we had taken the time to do that here and kind of sent it back to draft and then back again once or twice, as opposed to getting it to that point. That seems a little
Yeah.
out of order to me.
Mr. Roman.
I just
Oh,
had a
yeah.
comment on Mr. Kuzno's. I agree with you on one front, but on another front, I think it may have given us some direction. I mean, if you go back and watch the
That's helpful.
the meeting, it was, you know, okay, because if we provide I mean, they bless what we choose. So if we send a survey up to them, I'd rather know now whether whether we'd be on the right track or not than go through a whole thing and then have it come back and say, nothing here is worse. I agree with you that, yeah, it would have been nice to see it, but it was actually kind of nice to let them have the first run at things. So, but my
Okay.
thoughts. Sorry, Mr.
No,
Roman.
that's fine. You have anything?
I completely agree with Brad. It does seem sort of rushed. But I have a comment regarding what you said about proposing things in writing and coming up with questions. I don't feel that's our responsibility. I feel that's why we hired Cobalt, to take our idea or what we're aiming to get to, and let him formulate or let them formulate how to get there.
Okay.
I'm not an expert on how to phrase a question or any of the other parts of a survey, but that's what their expertise is, and that's what we're paying them for. So I think rather than coming up with direct questions, give them more of ideas like we just gave input tonight on, what we know already and where we expect to get to, and what people's expectations are. So that's how I feel.
Okay, I must have misphrased that too then. But yeah, no, we need to give them kind of what we want to know in the end. Is it yes or no for this, or how are people feeling about something? So is there something we're missing here, or something that shouldn't be in here that we're asking? And so those kind of questions. If you look through here, just provide feedback. If you think of something later, and you just want to shoot an email over to me or Cobalt, well, William or Charlene, that would be really helpful. And I want to say to the public, I know the public is watching, I have received a couple letters from the public, and they have items that are on their mind, and I'll be happy to pass those on to the rest of the board if I get information. But I also consider carefully what they're saying, because there are smart people out in this township, and they have concerns, and we ought to be addressing some of those concerns too, and not writing them off. Mr. Dignan.
Two quick things. I just want to clarify. When I said I have some questions I want to put down, they're not questions for the survey. They're questions for the company we've hired, that as I digest and reflect on tonight's meeting, I know there's going to be things that I'm going to go, I want to ask you this, I want to ask them that. They're not questions of what the survey should be. I agree with Mr. Roman on that sense. On another note, I would ask that if any of us happen to get a correspondence, like a letter you mentioned, if we could bring it to the board or get it to the president or the chair for item 6 on our agendas each meeting, it would be very helpful to have those. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Well, so my expectation is that we'll have some back and forth here, and when we get something to a more comfortable form and with more or corrected questions or whatever, we'll put it back on our agenda. Now, Janet, do you have something to say about fees? And
No, I actually had a question about, or not a question, a comment. I think that any draft that goes out should probably come to the Planning Commission first.
oh yeah, right. Well, I would think we would see it next. I think everything will happen with, my impression is everything ought to happen with us until it's pretty close. What do the rest of you feel about that?
I agree.
Because, you know, the Board of Trustees, you know, they have a lot of stuff going on. They have a lot of stuff on their plate, and not like they couldn't deal with it, but it's our survey, so, and it's for the master plan. I don't think there's any argument there. It's for the next master plan, so we need to know a lot of information. Okay. So, so I don't know when it will come back onto our agenda again. I know there's going to be some back and forth amongst us, but I do want the public to know that they are welcome to send me any comments they have. I'll pass them along to everyone, and go ahead.
Would you like a motion to postpone that to? Would you,
to
item 9A, are we going to take an action to postpone that to an agenda in the future where we have ability to discuss it? Are we taking any action, or are we just going to leave it under old business and move on?
Yeah, I wasn't thinking we'd need to take any, well, it would make it really clear, though, if we made a motion to continue at a future, well, our next, it might not be available at our next meeting.
No. Let me propose a motion.
Okay, and I'll
I'd like
see
to
if
make a
it's right.
motion that under old business discussion of the citizen survey questionnaire be postponed to our next agenda where we have availability and time. Understanding that if there's an applicant or an item on our next agenda, it may get postponed to the following.
Okay, but that's not clear enough to me. I mean, because in 2 weeks, we might not have a draft that we could look at, even though we might have time on our agenda. And in a month,
Well,
maybe we'll have a draft, but it might take longer than that. I'll put it on as soon as we get something that's,
Well, let me modify my motion then. Make a motion to postpone discussion on the citizen survey until such time that we receive a draft and there's availability on our agenda.
okay,
That's my motion.
okay. We have a motion by Mr. Dignan. Do we have support by anyone? We could just leave it up in
Can we
the...
just table it?
Support, oh, sorry. I support.
Okay, we have a support by Ms. Chick. So, I mean, we could just leave it
On the
to
table.
when I'm well, not I, but, you know, when several of us, well, Janet, I'm sure will be looking at it, I'll be looking at it, I'm sure we'll have our new planner looking at it, and when we're comfortable that it's in a form that we can deal with it and make progress, it will come back.
How
Yeah,
do we all get that form?
I guess that's my question, too.
Well, it's usually, you know, usually small group, it's a small group discussion, and then when everyone's comfortable, it's like, here it comes, you know. You know, it's like when we get an applicant and Mr. Luan looks at it, and the engineer looks at it, and it goes through, and maybe Kurt looks at it, and then when it's ready, then it comes on our agenda. And we've had problems when we've gotten stuff too quickly, and like we've gotten, you know.
So I guess I
Madam
don't
Chair,
understand why, if there's a next draft that we get from the Cobalt, why can't we just all look at it?
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I
It's
agree.
likely to
It
not
should be an
be.
agenda
You're
item.
talking
Right.
about a subcommittee of some sort, that you're
Right, a
proposing a
subcommittee.
subcommittee, but there's no organized subcommittee for this.
We
at this
don't
point in
have an
time.
organized subcommittee, you're correct.
I mean, when the draft comes in, the discussion about it should happen at this table.
Agreed.
So we're
Okay.
provided in our packet, we have time to review it, and we'll discuss it here at the table.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so we,
A motion is...
your motion is, Lisa
to-
could read it if you wanted, but.
Thank you, Lisa.
To postpone discussion of the citizen survey questionnaire until such time as there is a draft to consider and there is time available on an agenda to discuss it.
Okay, motion by Mr. Dignan, support by Ms. Chick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? You had a question?
No, it's too late. It's fine. Nay,
Nay.
Nay?
I'm opposed. But that's fine. It doesn't matter.
You need to hold your hand up higher, sorry.
I did.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Okay. All right, new business,